นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings to everybody. Ajahn Chah used to say that one of the biggest problems for people practicing meditation is that they put a lot of effort into their meditation when they're doing it, which is good, very praiseworthy, noble effort, wholesome effort. But they often have a weakness in that when they finish their formal sitting or walking meditation period and they go off to do something else, then the mindfulness, the clarity, the calm that they've developed starts to evaporate, disappear. And very quickly thoughts come back in to fill the mind. Maybe even the very thoughts that sort of were bothering you earlier in the day before your meditation, or just thoughts in general. Or we go off and we start talking to people and doing different activities, and then we feel disappointed with ourselves for not maintaining our mindfulness. And so, as a monk, it's one of the things you hear all the time. Oh, how do you practice mindfulness in daily life? I can meditate, but after I meditate, I don't seem to have any mindfulness. Well, it is one of the challenges of the practice is to maintain mindfulness and continue it. But then the Buddha gave us so many techniques and ways and reflections and teachings to help us. It's really up to us to employ them, use them in our daily life. So there's different ones that we use. Like one of the ones is simply reminding ourselves of Buddha Dhamma Sangha through our day, through our lives. This is one thing sometimes people don't understand, why Buddhists have Buddha statues or pictures of Buddha or teachers, or they have little medallions or amulets or little pictures in lockets and things, or they wear meditation beads around their neck or around their wrist. All these things can often be quite helpful for people meditating because they just bring up that sense of mindfulness practice even though you're doing other activities. So people like to have a picture of Buddha or a statue in their workplace sometimes or at home, because it just reminds them of the Buddha and the Dhamma, and then that can help just to bring up a little bit more mindfulness. Or they have their amulet around their neck or the beads around their wrist, and that can remind them of the Buddha and remind them to be mindful, more mindful than normal. They're just one example, but we need to introduce the Buddhist teachings into our daily life more to help maintain this sense of practice as we go about what we could call more worldly or mundane activities. And that doesn't mean to say we can't go about more mundane worldly activities. We can't socialize, we can't work, we can't do anything. We can. The idea is to try and bring the attitude into those activities of one who is practicing. So of course reflecting on sila is a constant support to our practice. Because you notice when we are not really very aware of our speech and our actions, then our level of mindfulness will drop quite quickly. We just do or say whatever comes into our mind, or whatever the situation triggers or prompts. If we're not really reflecting on the moral or ethical nature of our conduct, then very easily we lose our mindfulness. So the practice of sila, be mindful of our speech, our actions, and keeping them within certain boundaries and limits, is another way we maintain mindfulness after our periods of meditation. And reflecting on the Dhamma also. Like one of the most useful reflections I've seen people benefit from is just reflecting on the impermanent nature of experience, the changing nature of experience. Makes you more mindful through your day. You call it anicca sanya, mindfulness of the perception of change or impermanence. But it makes you much more aware of things when you're observing, say, the passing away of a train of thoughts or a particular activity or thing that you're involved with, as well as the entering into that activity or the beginning of that thought. When you start to notice the ending of things, it makes you much more mindful, doesn't it? Because so often we're not aware of endings. Ajahn Chah used to say, everyone loves birth, but they don't like death. But he didn't just mean the birth of a person and the death of a person, he also meant the beginning and the ending of moods and actions and things we're doing in our day. We're always thinking of the next thing we're going to do. But sometimes we have to also, at that very same time, think, but that thing we're going to do is also going to end. And that's really useful when it's a stressful action or stressful activity, or something you're nervous about. Perhaps the most useful one of all would be going to see the dentist, because nobody likes dentists. Or, the dentist may be a very nice guy, but nobody likes going to see a dentist. But then if you're waiting, that's an ideal place to bring up the mindfulness of impermanence, and you just remind yourself, this too will pass. This dental appointment will come to an end. The very thoughts you have, maybe you have some nervous fear coming up about what the dentist is going to do. Those thoughts arise and pass away. Same with cravings and desires. We always get excited and stimulated by the beginning of things that are following our cravings. So we all like the beginning of a meal. But that's the very time to bring up the perception this meal will also end. And it becomes a good habit, you might say, a skillful habit, bringing up the perception of impermanence in so many things to counter the stress-producing way of thinking that we so often get caught into, and that makes us so unmindful. The stress, the suffering in life. This is why Ajahn Chah used the teaching on impermanence so often, and just reminded everyone it's all uncertain, it's not sure. So with monks, he'd be often helping them to see this in kind of simple things, like if there was a reason Ajahn Chah would be going out of the monastery to visit, say, another monastery on some business, and he may have some monks were appointed to go with him. 1 or 2 monks might have to accompany him. And sometimes, you'd wait a couple of hours for that trip to take place, while Ajahn Chah did other activities, talking to people, arranging things, even having a rest sometimes. And then another occasion, he'd do exactly the opposite. And the monks ready to go and accompany him somewhere, assuming he'd probably be a while, were caught out when he said, "Off we go," and gave them maybe 5 minutes notice to get their possessions together and get into a car ready to go. It could be unpredictable in both ways. It could be very slow, it could be very fast, or sometimes just on time. I remember when Ajahn Mahabua, a colleague of Ajahn Chah's, came to stay at Wabapong the first time, and I was looking after him. And the first day he came and we prepared the meal for him, and he took ages to come out for the meal. And the whole Sangha was there. There's hundreds of monks, lots of monks there. And Ajahn Mahabua was, I think he was talking to people, he was talking to monks, talking to lay people, and he didn't come out for ages. And then he finally came out to the eating hall where all the monks were gathered and the distribution of food and the meal offering took place, which is fine because monks are used to this kind of thing. But I just remember that occasion because I remember the second day he did exactly the opposite. He came out of his kuti, his hut, and I was accompanying him, and he walked straight over there. As soon as there's a bell rung at about 10 to 8 or 8 o'clock in the morning at Ajahn Chah's monastery, announcing time for the meal. And he walked straight out at 8 o'clock and was sitting there before anyone else, and it made everyone else feel guilty that they were late. Unpredictable. I mean, neither is wrong. It's just causes, we say causes and conditions are unpredictable. But it was a great teaching in uncertainty, not sure. And some of the monks were kind of just talking together and thinking, they thought maybe he'd just kind of channeled into Ajahn Chah's way of doing things when one day he's slow, one day he was fast. You're never quite sure what's happening next. Really, you don't necessarily need a teacher to do that for you. I mean, it's helpful when they do it because it's just it really hammers the lessons home that everything is uncertain, everything is subject to change. But really, life does it for us anyway. If you start developing the perception of impermanence to help you understand the truth of things better, you'll realize life is impermanent in its nature. It's uncertain. You don't have to look for it. It's there all the time. And when you are doing your meditation and you are trying to be maybe more mindful than normal by focusing on the breath, well, straight away you'll see how uncertain your mind is. One breath in, one breath out is uncertainty in itself. You don't just breathe in and never breathe out. You don't just breathe out and never breathe in again. Each breath in, each breath out is just saying breath is impermanent, breath is subject to change. And then while you're doing it, what your mind is saying or feeling or thinking is impermanent, isn't it? If you meditate regularly, there'll be one day when you're really enjoying it and getting into it, and then the next day you hate it and you don't want anything to do with meditation ever again and you can't stand it. But if you're reflecting on impermanence and the uncertainty of your mind and thoughts, you'll know that's life, isn't it? Your moods change. You react to things. There may be causes and conditions that trigger those reactions, but the reactions are uncertain. Or even just very mundane thoughts as you're meditating, you'll see how one of the reasons we lose mindfulness in our meditation is because you pick up on the beginning of the thought and you start thinking that thought, whether it's random thought, a very high and refined thought, or a very ugly, gross thought, or a very sad thought, or a very happy thought. The thing that catches it is more just the beginning of the next train of thought. It interests the mind, the details of what we're thinking, the words, the images, the message that thought is conveying is what tricks us, catches us out, and instead of staying with the feeling of the in and out breath, we start to go with that train of thought. And once it's got us, then there'll be another train of thought, another image, another memory, another bit of detail added to the story. And it may be a long time before we regain mindfulness. And the mind just has picked up one image after another, one concept, one idea after another, and just move. And when you gain your mindfulness, you realize how humorous it is. You're caught out by a thought of what you're going to do later. You say after work or after meditation, I'm going to go and do this. Maybe you start thinking of something you enjoy. So you say, I'm going to go and read my book, watch my program, talk to my friend, eat some nice food. But if you're not mindful, then eat my nice food will then be on. But then after eating my nice food, then I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to go there, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and maybe after 10 minutes you've gone all around the world simply by losing track of the breath and getting caught out by the impermanent nature of the mind, just jumping from one idea to the next. If you develop this anicca sanya, the impermanent nature, the perception of impermanence, and see that, what you're seeing more is just every thought arises, every thought ceases. Whether it's interesting, boring, beautiful, ugly, high, refined, coarse or refined, superior, inferior, interesting, boring. That's the one thing they have in common. A train of thought arises and ceases. Whether it's literally a word or a phrase or a few sentences or a whole elaborate story or set of images like a dream. There's an arising and then there's a ceasing. And that's the one thing you really know. That's the nature of, we say, sankharas, mental formations. They're impermanent in their nature. They arise, they cease. They may tell us something, they may inform us of something. We can harness the thinking mind to reason things and understand things, and that's how we learn a lot of things in this world and gain knowledge and understanding. But here, with regard to the anicca sanya, the impermanence of them, that's what you're focusing on, and they all have this in common. They arise and they cease. I remember one monk, he would meditate on this all the time, so it became his main theme of meditation, just watching the ending of every thought. He kind of made an art, a skill out of it. So literally, however good or bad the thought was, didn't matter. As soon as he's caught into another train of thought, another idea, another image in the mind, he'd just be focusing on the ending of that, the dropping away of the thought, the dropping away of the image, until it was just his habit, is always seeing the ending of things. And it meant when you talk to him, his conversations would drop off sometimes because he kind of couldn't sustain conversation very well, because he's just dropping off into seeing the ending of whatever train of thought or train of ideas he was stringing together to have that conversation. But it worked for him, and he said one day he actually got into a really deep state of samadhi, just seeing the ending of things, the ending of things, the ending of things. So we can learn this and become more observant of the ending of things, the arising, the ceasing of things in meditation. And this you can also introduce into your daily life to help maintain mindfulness. Just as we reflect on the precepts, just as we can sometimes turn to the breath or another meditation object, we can use the perception of impermanence throughout our day just to help ground the mind in the present moment and not get too lost in things, our reactions to things, our daydreams through our day, when we may be doing many different activities, maybe very busy, and just have a constant schedule and constant range of activities we have to be doing, performing, places to go, things to do. How do we maintain mindfulness throughout that? Well, introducing this perception of impermanence can be very helpful. And literally, as you go to work, say sitting in your car or sitting on the train or whatever. Or if you're working from home these days with COVID, maybe just before you as you're turning your computer on to work from home, say, just bring up the perception of impermanence. Just as you start your work day, also reflect there'll be an end to this work day. There'll be at some point later in the day when I stop my work for the day. And just make that your mind really mindful of that fact at the very beginning of the day. Or as the beginning of a journey, you're getting in your car to go somewhere. Before you do anything else, just remind yourself, well, I'll go to this place and this journey will end. And maybe after many hours, even at the end of the day, I'll bring the car back to this spot, my home, for example, and my day's journeys in this car will come to an end. A very simple kind of concept, just contemplating the ending of things right at the beginning of things, but it makes you much more aware of the impermanence of things. Whether it's a conversation with someone, this conversation will end. This meal I'm beginning will end. This thing I'm reading will come to an end. This place I'm going to visit or work at will come to an end. And you can take it to real lengths if you want. So I know some people who contemplate the impermanence of life regularly. They're contemplating how this could be the last day of my life, this could be my last breath, this could be my last conversation, my last day of work. You can even introduce the recollection excuse me, you can introduce the recollection of death into your practice of the recollection of impermanence by just reflecting one day all the people at your place of work won't be there anymore. You'll be dead, they'll be dead, there'll be a whole new set of people at that job. Like today we were talking in the monastery about planting some trees, and the kind of trees we're going to plant are very slow growing, beautiful trees relating to the Bodhi tree. They're called Moreton Bay figs. Melbourne has a lot of them, but they grow really slowly here because it's a bit colder than Queensland where they're from. And if you've got 100 years to spare, these trees will grow into beautiful trees with huge branches, and they're from the ficus family, the fig family, so they're related to the Bodhi tree. And they just have a kind of a good feel to them, like they're quite spiritual trees, good trees to meditate under. But we were discussing, we're going to plant these trees. We've planted a few already, and we will be planting some more. But we're never going to see them. I'm 60 years old this year. If I plant a tree like that, I'll be long gone before I ever see the results. We planted some 10 years ago and they're still tiny. They'll take forever. Trees are really a really good reflection on impermanence, because you do it for the next generation of Buddhists who will use this monastery. We built this hall that I'm sitting in here. Maybe you've never seen it if you're online, but this hall is quite a solidly built hall made out of bricks and steel roof, because we built it to withstand bushfire. But when we built it, the engineer was designing it, and the architect and the engineer, and I was talking to them and I said, how long do you normally guarantee a building for? And they said 50 years. And I said, can you guarantee this one for 100 years? And they said, why? And I said, well, we want it to last a long time, partly because I don't want to have to fix anything. I just want it to be up and solid and here for a long time, because I'm lazy. But I also want to do it as a gift for the next monks who live here and look after the place, so they don't have to rebuild it either. So it'll last for 100 years. I don't know if it will, but the idea was there. But there's things in this world that we do that we're never going to see the fruits of. Huh? You build a hall, or you plant a tree. You may use it for a while or see that tree growing for a while, but then eventually you'll be gone. Or you go to your job tomorrow and somebody will be there, and in a few years they'll be gone. Eventually everyone who you work with will be gone. Either they retire or some of them will be dead. Already there'll be some people you've worked with before who maybe have already retired or even died. That's life, and that's impermanence, isn't it? And it's a sobering thought. What does it do when you contemplate impermanence about your workplace or your family or your possessions or a tree or a meditation hall? It doesn't really matter. What does it do? It sobers you up. It brings you back to the present moment, brings you back to the truth. What impermanence does is sobers you up from the intoxication with endlessly following desire, expectation, wanting things from this world, following craving, because craving in its nature is endless. So craving is what takes you away from seeing impermanence. Impermanence is what sobers you up from craving. So as soon as you become aware of the impermanence, say, of the people you work with, that one day you won't see them again or you won't be at that job again, what does it do? It stops you in your tracks, at least for a moment, doesn't it? It cuts through the craving associated with your job, perhaps. That could be desires and ambitions, what you want from your job, your expectations, your hopes. I want to get more money, more promotion. I want to be able to do more things, get more skilled at it, know more, get more knowledge. So there's all that kind of desire that it will cut through when you think of it as an impermanent thing, that one day you won't do that job anymore. Kind of stops you, it sobers you up from the intoxicating nature of your craving, doesn't it? Or it could be the aversion kind of craving, which is also craving. Your mind is endlessly complaining with negativity about your job, for example. I've got to go and do this job, and then they want me to do this, and I've got to do that, and I've got no time, and they don't pay me enough, and nobody helps me, and it's not fair, and blah, blah, blah. But then you bring in the reflection, but one day I won't be there. I won't be doing that job. One day I'll be retired or even dead. One day the other people will be dead. One day it'll be a whole different set of people doing this job. What does that reflection do? It cuts through your craving, doesn't it? It cuts through the complaining mind, the negativity, and it's, I hadn't thought of that. I forgot that. Yeah, I won't be here. In a few years' time, I'll be gone. Other people will be gone. We say sobers you up. It brings clarity and mindfulness, clear comprehension into your day when you have that reflection. And it's not to make your mind kind of depressed, we're all going to die, what's the point? It's all meaningless. It's not that. It's just to help counter the craving that takes over our mind so easily as we go through our day and makes us unmindful. It's the same with socializing. You go to a dinner party or you visit your friends for New Year, Chinese New Year, Western New Year, or some birthday party or whatever. It doesn't matter. Socializing exactly the same. Before you go to this nice dinner do, just reflect. There'll be the beginning of the dinner do, the beginning of the meal, and then there'll be the end of it. And then you'll have moved on, and it will be a thing of the past. It will be a memory. Just bring up that reflection to counter any craving coming into your mind at that time. Maybe it's something you're really looking forward to. It's exciting. And hopefully you'll enjoy it as well, but it will come to an end. Or maybe it's something you're really afraid of or nervous about because you've got to meet someone there who's going to cause you trouble or bring up anger or something. But it will end. So whether you like something or you don't like it, or you're excited and interested in it, or you're bored or you're fed up with it, the reflection on impermanence and change kind of cuts through all of that, cuts through your sort of basic reactions, your personal opinions and feelings and views about things to the truth. And the truth brings some stillness and quietness to the mind. Even if only for a few moments, it's better than nothing. And sometimes it really hits you, and it can make your mind go quiet for a long time. This too will end. The worst thing in the world will also end. The best thing in the world will also end. Because everything arises and ceases. That's the nature of sankharas. And it's just truth. There's no one you can blame for it. Some people even blame the Buddha or some teacher for pointing out the truth because it's unpleasant. It's not what they want to hear. This too will end when you're about to have the best experience of your life. If there's a person standing next to you, you'll sort of say, "Shut up, I don't want to hear this now," because you're enjoying yourself. But maybe that voice in your head, maybe it's your own voice, or maybe someone next to you, maybe they're just slightly helping you wake up to the truth a bit so you don't get so lost. It's particularly useful for stress because so much stress is based on taking things too seriously, giving too much importance to a certain event or our own feeling about it or a person. When we give too much importance to things, we're forgetting the impermanence. The mind builds up a big picture of, this is really terrible or bad, or I have to be really careful here, or this is so important, I'll just die if this doesn't work, whatever. Our craving and attachment is like that. It builds things up as really important. But at the same time, we're creating stress, suffering for ourselves. And the reflection on impermanence helps there, doesn't it? It just quietly makes you step back or pause for a moment and say, oh yeah, this too will pass. So this is the practice of insight or wisdom. And you could say it's the practice of Vipassana, but you might say introducing Vipassana or insight, wisdom into our daily life. Just reflecting on the uncertainty, the changing nature of things. Things don't always go to plan. They don't always go as well as we would like, and so we get a bit unhappy or bitter or complain. We don't complain when things go better than we were planning. When things are smoother and easier and more successful than we were expecting, we don't complain then, do we? But the truth is exactly the same as when things go worse than we were planning. If you think about it, something goes much worse than you could ever have imagined. Okay, it's not good, it's hard work, it's unpleasant, but it's impermanent. But when things go much better than we ever expected, better than our wildest dreams, that's still impermanence, just the same. But we don't complain then, do we? We only complain when it's worse than we were expecting. When it's better than we were expecting, we're just happy and off we go. Because we got what we want for a while anyway. But you have to use this reflection for everything. That's what it's doing. It's bringing your mind to equanimity, and it's the leveler, one of the levelers of life. Meaning it levels out the highs and the lows, the good and the bad, the excitement and the boredom, by showing you the truth of it, that these things are impermanent. So it helps us out of stress, but it helps us not get too lost in the happiness and the success either. In a way, it kind of sounds boring or very ordinary. No highs, no lows. What have you got left? You just got this kind of middle way. But it's the way of peace. where you're not getting attached or giving too much importance to either good or bad, high or low, success or failure, but you're just knowing these experiences, and particularly knowing the impermanent nature of them. Nothing lasts. And if you've done this for a while, you might find it quite liberating. It doesn't mean to say you stop going to work, or you stop meeting people, or you stop doing anything in your life, but what it's doing is helping your mind just to come in line with the truth. So it gives you this evenness of attitude, evenness of mind in the midst of the ups and downs of the unevenness of life. It's the one thing you can really be confident is going to happen, is that everything will arise and pass away. Nothing else is sure. What will arise and pass away, who will arise and pass away, how they will arise and pass away, well, you can't always predict. But the fact that things arise and cease, that you can predict. And you think about it, and you sit here, tomorrow you're definitely going to have lots of thoughts arise and cease. It's the one thing you can know about tomorrow. You have lots of different kinds of sense consciousness arise and cease. You'll hear things arise and cease. Hearing will arise and cease. You'll see many different things. It will arise and cease. Seeing consciousness. You'll feel different things. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. All of this you can predict. You don't know the details. You don't know the exact mechanism how things will arise and cease, but you know things will arise and cease. Things will start and end. Tomorrow you're going to have a lot of endings. When you're not mindful, you just get caught into the beginnings. But when you're more mindful of impermanence, you'll be seeing the endings as well, and you'll know this will end. It's good, but it's going to end. Or it's bad, but it will end. And in the end, to coin a phrase, you'll just be seeing the ending of things. It's one kind of jnana, one kind of insight, just seeing the cessation of sankharas. Every thought arising and then just ceasing, every feeling, every perception ceasing, sense consciousness ceasing, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching. Everything is ceasing. So they say this kind of perception at first can be a bit disconcerting, frightening, because everything is ceasing. It's like, what can you hold on to? You could compare it to a bit like a mental earthquake. Like if you've ever been unfortunate enough to be in an earthquake, when the ground is literally moving under you, most people find it quite disconcerting because you don't know what to hold on to because the whole ground is moving and things are falling off shelves and you just don't know where to go for safety. If you're indoors, you have to go outdoors, but even outdoors, you just don't know what to do. But this is a bit like a mental earthquake for a moment, so people often find it disconcerting. They pull back if they're meditating or they're observing this in mindfulness. At first, they're not used to it, so it's like, oh, everything is ceasing. And it's like, where on earth can you find any kind of refuge in this world? But that's the point. You start seeking refuge in the Dhamma, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, rather than the world. Because the things of the world are uncertain. They change, they don't last. What lasts, ultimately, is the insight into the deathless, the unconditioned. Impermanence is a reflection of the conditioned nature of physical and mental phenomena. Nibbana is the unconditioned. So it's where your mind sees and knows as in line with the unconditioned. There's no arising and ceasing, there's no birth and death. That's why it's the highest peace, the highest happiness. But until we've reached that, then we may have glimpses of it, but then there's plenty of times we'll be caught out by the impermanence again. It changed on me, it didn't last. I thought this was going to solve all my problems, but it didn't because things change. I thought this was going to make me happy forever and ever, but it didn't because things change. So we need a lot of patience as we go through our practice, a lot of patience, a lot of goodwill, and keep coming back to the truth. And ultimately that's what liberates the mind. So tonight, just giving you a few reflections on how to practice mindfulness of impermanence through your day can help bring you back to the Dhamma in any situation at any time. And particularly for those of you suffering from post-meditation stress, where you've been calm, mindful, peaceful, and then it all disappears and you're back to a mind that's all over the place as you go through your daily business. Bring up the impermanence, the reflection on impermanence, and this will help you, ground you in truth and help you to let go of some of the things that catch you out and distract you. But anyway, for tonight, I'll leave you there with that.